Convincing any car enthusiast to go EV was always going to be a tough job, but no one had their work cut out for them quite like our Abarth. Let's face it, our Abarths have always been known for their raw petrol performance, their noisy exhausts, and often their unforgivable and formidable ride quality. And those are attributes we don't usually think of when we think of electric vehicles. Electric vehicles are calming, they're quiet, they're serene and comfortable. So can the two worlds collide? Well, our Abarth seemed to think so, and this was their first stab at it. This is the Abarth 500e, and this isn't the first time that I've had this car on the channel. I had it on the channel back in 2023 when they first launched it, and back then it didn't have an awful lot of competitors. But now more manufacturers are having a stab at performance small EVs. So can the Abarth 500e still stand its ground within this market? Well, that's what I'm going to find out. And as a previous petrol Abarth owner, have they managed to embody the spirit of Abarth? These are all questions that I'm going to answer in today's video. So if you want to find out the answers, then please keep watching. And if you like new car reviews and car content, then go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Let's talk numbers. On paper, you're looking at 152 brake horsepower paired together with 235 pound-feet of torque, and that translates to a 0 to 62 time of 7 seconds flat. In a car this size, that's quick. Off the line, it punches with the kind of urgency that makes hitting a B road like this genuinely entertaining. In fact, despite being heavier and taking slightly longer to get to 62 than its predecessor, the petrol car, it still beat it around the Bolocco racetrack. And that's because the torque is immediate, pushing the 500e out of the corners quicker than the combustion car could manage. And it's its driving dynamics where things really go Abarth's way. The chassis has been properly worked on. You can tell there's love gone into this. The steering is quick and weighty, and body roll is minimal, and it changes direction with genuine sharpness. Throw it down a twisty B road like this and there's fun to be had. Proper, real fun. And just like the best cars in this car's class, it behaves more like a go-kart than a car. And with the short wheelbase and decent weight balance from the battery pack, it can even give you a hint of lift-off oversteer. With its upgraded brakes, larger ventilated discs, it feels solid, and there's little sign of fade during enthusiastic driving. Pedal feel is consistent too, which isn't always a given in EVs. The Abarth is available as either just a standard hardtop hatchback, or you can have the convertible, and given the choice, I'll always go for the convertible. Let's face it, this is a car which is already quite compromised when it comes to practicality, so why not add to that further by adding a fabric roof? It's not a full convertible, so as you'll see, you still have the full structure of the car. It's kind of like an extended sunroof which can roll all the way back. Interior-wise, it's very nice in here. I really like this interior. What's quite funny is spending time with the convertible. As soon as I put the roof up, it then becomes very, very dark, and you realise how everything in this car is dark. Dark roof, you've got dark seats, dark dashboard, feels very, very claustrophobic. So again, that's a reason why I'd definitely be opting to have this panoramic roof sunroof. The seats are a real highlight for me. So our Abarths have always been known for using Saybelt bucket seats, and I'm so pleased that they still do in this new electrified version, and they've just elevated them past previous generation cars. So you've got Alcantara down the centre, and these are all embossed in that kind of electric Abarth feel that you see on the badging. You also have a little peek through of the lime green with the badges here, and then you have green and blue stitching that runs around the edges, and you have leather on the outsides of the seats, or imitation leather at least. I love these a lot, but I'm not particularly keen on the red on the exterior, and the main reason for that is because I love a car to be cohesive, and if you go for the blue or the yellow, then that matches together with this stitching on the inside. So I would definitely go for one of those two colours. But it does look quite smart in the red, and I did notice today that as much as I thought I didn't like red cars, I had to remember that I actually own a red up GTI, so I was being a bit hypocritical. As I said, it is not the most practical car, and there's not the most amount of storage. You will find a little bit of storage inside the armrest, and you also have a little bit of storage in the centre console here. You've got a little bit of storage that you can pop a mobile phone in, and in this Turismo Convertible you have wireless charging here, and you have a very, very small glove box and also some storage in the doors as well. It's not terrible, and I think they've done a good job at squeezing in storage as and where they can, but it's definitely behind many of its rivals. You also have some lovely little design touches inside of here. So inside this wireless charging pad, you actually have the Turin skyline, as this was mostly where this car has been designed, which I love. And you also will find inside these doors, it says made in Torino as well, which is just a lovely little design touch and a bit of history about the car, and to remind you that this is a car which has been built in Italy, because we know that nowadays many cars that are coming out of Stellantis are no longer built where they first originated. So it's nice to know that you're getting a product which definitely feels very, very Italian. And you can tell by the design flares. You have Alcantara in the centre, and you have this swooping rounded dashboard which is very familiar to the 500e. Lovely steering wheel as well, Alcantara. You've got the 12 o'clock marker at the top in blue. You've got that scorpion badge in the centre there, and you've just got some hints of this chrome. It's not actual proper chrome, it is just plastic, but it does add to the design. Really easy to use buttons on the steering wheel, and I love the fact that you also have volume and you can control your tracks behind the wheel. I really like this actually, they're really nice to use when driving, and it declutters the cabin. The big downside when it comes to these Fiat 500 and Abarths is the infotainment system. It's not exactly the best system. You do have a nice screen, but in this convertible you will find a lot of glare on this screen, so it becomes really difficult to use. Wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and you've got satellite navigation built into the higher spec cars, but to be honest, it's not the best. This built-in satellite navigation takes a while to load up, so if you are going to go for something like that, I would say use your Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You get single zone climate control, and you get these piano keys which just sit underneath this center console here. They're really easy to use, easy to turn up and down when driving, which I really, really like. Underneath this and just above the wireless charging, you have got a USB. There is also a USB-C, but it's just tucked away down here in this armrest. You get another USB and a USB-C as well, and also a 12 volt as well. So pretty much you've got all of your charging needs covered. But we need to talk about its rivals. The Mini has always been a formidable competitor when it comes to the Abarth. And even with the standard Mini Cooper, the non-John Cooper Works one, it gets 184 brake horsepower, and the standard car is heavier than this car, so it takes about 0.4 seconds longer to hit the 62. But more recently, they have released a proper beefy JCW version, and that tops the power to a 258 brake horsepower, and it drops the sprint to below 6 seconds. And you may be thinking, but yes, Tish, that car's going to be a big wedge more. Not necessarily. It's actually only £1,000 more than this Turismo convertible. But you could argue that the Mini has put itself in a new league with over 250 brake horsepower. It no longer feels like a pocket rocket, and that type of power loses its ability to just be wholesome fun, and I would somewhat agree, but that moves us on to the biggest thorn in the side of the 500e, and that's the Alpine A290. This is a car with more power, more range, and a price that undercuts this convertible Turismo version. And speaking of range, officially Abarth claim that it gets 164 miles of WLTP, but in reality you'll struggle to see more than 130 miles in mixed driving, and in sport, Scorpion mode, it actually drops to under 100 miles. Fast A-Road Blast can see figures as low as 90 miles, which is way behind rivals. Efficiency that I've been seeing sitting between 3.2, 3.6, and that's in the standard modes. If you hit it hard, it can drop below 3, which is poor even by fun car standards. However, not to be all doom and gloom, even the petrol model was only ever capable of 300 miles and a full tank. So those that are looking at one of these likely only need it for the shorter runarounds, and for that, I honestly think it's perfect. But overall, it is a really nice car inside. It does feel high quality. It feels on par with the Alpine A290 in my personal opinion, but not quite as plush as something like the Mini. You also have to get used to the Abarth driving position. Like I said, this is something which is so well known for this brand, but you sit up quite high, and even more in this car because you're sitting on the batteries. It's a shame you can't sit down any lower because I think that helps with the sporty driving experience, but if you've had a petrol Abarth in the past, you will know that it's like this because it was exactly the same in those cars as well. When it comes to the steering wheel, you have both reach and rake, so lots of adjustments on the steering wheel. So hopefully you should be able to find a comfortable driving experience. That's in the front, however. I wouldn't say it's quite so comfortable in the back. Let's face it, there's probably very few people who are using cars like this as their family car because these seats, more to me, are emergency seating. They're very small in the back here, so you can carry 4 people in this car if you absolutely had to, but most of the time I think it's best used as a 2-seater. You have got 2 ISOFIX fitments in the back here, so you can fit child seats, but of course without the rear doors it can be a little bit tricky getting them in and out. It's still trimmed very nicely. You've got the Alcantara, you've also got the contrasting stitching, but as you can see I have real minimal legroom. So I've got this seat in my driving position as a 5'5" driver, and I have got my knees right into the back of this seat, so whoever's driving is not going to be particularly comfortable. You haven't got any charging in the back here. You'd have to use the charging from the front, which I don't think would be an issue. You haven't got any storage either, but again I really can't see that being a problem. But you do actually have 2 hooks here, so if you needed to hang up your suit, that is something you could do. So space in the rear is very, very poor, but what about in the boot? Well, the good news is you don't lose out on any boot space when it comes to the convertible version. The bad news? Well, the bad news is there was only 185 litres to start with. So as you can see, when you want to access the boot, you do have to put the top part of the roof back, and then inside here, this gives you not exactly the best load area. It's quite difficult actually, because it's quite low down, but it's obstructed by the boot lid. So really, you're only going to want to load small items in here, and you're going to need to have pretty good mobility to get in and out of that boot. You will be able to fit a couple of carry-on suitcases, but there's also no space underneath the bonnet. So if you also want to carry your cables, they're going to need to sit inside of the boot, which is a little bit of a shame. And going back to that question, do I, as a previous petrol Abarth owner, think that this model has embodied the spirit of Abarth? And I think so. The combustion car was always far from perfect, and it was its quirks that made it so fun. And this model is no different. The spin from the tyres, the weighty steering, and the cheeky behaviour, they all make for a really fun little runaround, whether it's petrol or electric. There is, of course, the subject of the sound generator, something that I thought that I would be all on board for, but the reality is very different. You see, unlike the Hyundai Ioniq 5N, which mimics gear changes, the Abarth only has 2 levels of sound. You either get this drony burble which idles in the background, or it revs as you blip on the throttle. However, it doesn't change, so you never really blip the throttle when you're gaining speed, because this only has 1 gear with it being an electric car, and that means it feels super drony. It's honestly fun for about 5 minutes when you're at standstill and you're showing your friends, but after that you'll be looking to turn it off, and turning it on and off is also a very long process. So you have to go through the steering wheel and you have to go through a few different settings. I think it's about 4 steps to be able to turn it on and off. And I think that means that once you have it off, you're probably just going to keep it off. Charging, whilst not a deal breaker, is also not that particularly fast. So it will DC charge up to 85 kilowatts, which is slightly behind some of the newer models which are being released. But you have to remember that this car has a small battery. So that means even if you've only got a maximum power of 85 kilowatts, it's still going to top up pretty quick if you find an 100 kilowatt charger. At home, it's going to take you about 8 hours for a full charge, and that will cost you about £10 or under, even if you're not on the cheapest EV tariff. Abarth is one of those brands that you really do have to spend time with a car and let all of its charm soak in. And I think after you've spent some time with it and you've drunk a bit of the Kool-Aid, you realise that these do have a ton of character. Fiats, Abarths, they've never been the best cars in their class, but they're oozing with all of this personality, from the exterior to the interior to the driving experience as well. And that's something which used to make me love my Abarth so much. It took me a while to get used to it. When I actually first took delivery of my Abarth, I didn't like the driving position. I couldn't quite work out how to change gear and make it make all the fun noises from the exhaust. But after a while, I learned exactly how to best drive it to get the best out of my car, and then I fell in love with it. In fact, I still think about that car quite a lot. Do I think I'd think about the EV quite as much? I don't think so. That limited range for me personally, doing so many miles, just makes it a little bit difficult to want to grab the keys for every time I go on a long drive. But if I didn't have to cover a lot of miles, I was just doing short journeys, I think you could have a lot of fun in this car. But it's the price tag which is the real stickler, because this car is priced, in my opinion, about £5,000 too expensive. If I had the money to spend, I'd probably be putting my money into the Alpine A290 and getting that extra power and extra range. But that doesn't take away from the fact that I think there's a charm that you just can't replicate from the Abarth. But let me know, what do you think of the Abarth 500e? Pop it in the comments down below. I really hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, go ahead and give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to see more, well, you're in the right place. Go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Until next time, guys, see you later.